innovation can be around climate finance, for example, or a lot of different ways to participate in supporting the global efforts into becoming a net zero world and even a net positive world in terms of climate. When I started working in the climate space around 10 years ago, a lot of people were telling me, you have no idea about solar energy or wind energy. And yes, I'm not an expert in clean energy, but most of the people make that association first, that working in climate is basically working on renewable energy. So these sessions, we want to take you over different categories of climate innovations. And I'm really glad today to be talking about climate adaptation and resilience, which is a topic that is very dear to me. And first, I would like just to remind a little bit why we're talking about climate, why it's important. And for many years now, more than 20 years, climate experts are saying that our planet is literally burning. And unfortunately, we get reminded of this time and time over. And I know the audience is quite diverse here, but the summer that we had, and I understand it's not summer everywhere currently, but we're coming out of summer in the northern part. And this summer was a record in terms of temperature. I am from Morocco, for example, and we've reached more than 50 degrees Celsius this summer in Morocco, which is really a record. And it was also a record in terms of wildfires across the globe. There were close to 100,000 wildfires this summer. From part of the world that we're really not used to wildfires. In Canada, for example, a lot of wildfires across Europe, and unfortunately, a country that was severely damaged was Greece. And I was there this summer to enjoy the beautiful lifestyle there. And I've noticed how many wildfires were starting from anywhere, and really was a record year that hit very severely. And unfortunately, just after the wildfires, they suffered from floodings just after that. And it's a trend that we often see actually after severe water heat waves. The soils get really dry, and once we have very severe rainfalls, the soils cannot absorb, so the systems are not really prepared, and we have a very quick flooding. And we've seen this many times. Just to remind, last year, more or less in the same time, Pakistan knew a very severe flooding when a third of the country was underwater, and a large part of the population was severely damaged. Another thing that is not directly related to climate change, but there are some indirect links, are the earthquakes. We had a very severe one before the summer in Turkey, and just a few days ago in Morocco with the earthquakes. And unfortunately, these kind of disasters, I don't want to say getting used to them, but we are seeing them time and time over. And again, what can we do about it? And that's exactly what we are trying to tackle in ClimateLaunchpad and at Climate-KIC, is what are the solutions that we need to take into account when we're faced with climate change. And in this first part, I just want to review briefly and explain what are the main differences between the solutions that are trying to reverse or stop the effects of climate change, and the other ones that are in order to live in a new environment. First of all, maybe just briefly remind why this is happening and why are we at the place where we are today in the world. And this is mainly due to the greenhouse effect, basically. The greenhouse effect is a natural phenomenon that we have in the world, and it's basically due to the gases that compose the atmosphere. And thanks to those gases, actually, the energy reflected by the sun is absorbed in the atmosphere and help us to create a healthy environment for us to live as the way we've lived for thousands of years. Basically, what the greenhouse effect, it increases on average around 15 degrees Celsius the temperature that we have. Without the atmosphere, we would have 15 degrees less. So life on Earth would be much harder, actually. So the greenhouse's effect helps absorb the energy that we get from the sun, reflect some of that we don't necessarily need, but it kind of regulates the effect that the energy that we get from the sun. Now the problem is what happens when the greenhouse gases change in terms of their composition. When we generate more greenhouse gases, basically we capture more temperature from the sun. Less of it is reflected, and so it has a severe long-term effect. And a lot of scientists have proved that the change in the greenhouse gases is directly linked to the human activity. And we can link it at the start of the Industrial Revolution, where basically we started centralizing the production. Before, most of the production was decentralized in a small scale and not using much energy. In the Industrial Revolution, we started building big factories. We started having much bigger farms and operating that really at an industrial level. And we started using massively gases that have an effect on the greenhouse effect. And I want to talk mainly two gases are the majority of the gases that we are emitting through the human activities that we have. Is carbon dioxide from one side, that is mainly due to the production of energy as we use it mostly globally in the production facilities that we have, oil, gas, coal, etc. And the second one is the methane, that maybe is less known, but it's everything that is produced mainly from agricultural output. The production of cow meat is actually one of the biggest emitters here. When we produce that at an industrial level, it becomes the impact can be quite big. And I want also to cite all the landfill and how we manage the waste that also emits a lot of methane. Other gases are there, but a little bit less of an effect. But it's mainly the combination of these that alters the composition of the atmosphere, the greenhouse gases, and basically are raising the temperature over and over on time. So what should we do, basically? That's the main question that everybody working in climate solutions is trying to have. Basically, there are two main ways to start tackling the climate effects, trying to solve the problem at a global scale. The first thing is, let's try to stop the evolution of the greenhouse gases and stop the emission of the gases and the change that we have in the atmosphere. So everything here, it's called mitigation. Let's mitigate our activity so that it has less effect, low effect, or even a positive effect in the atmosphere. So I will not talk about this today, but just wanted to remind the main differences between these two is mitigation. We need to avoid, reduce the emission of the gases, just so that we stop this escalation of the temperature. We stop the the ice to be melted in the Nordic poles, and we stop the increase of sea level. Those are actually the three main indicators that we follow when we look at the climate: temperature, the ice that is melting, the sea levels. Is the three metrics that follow. And then, so yeah, we need to stop emitting, reducing, but then we've seen that these disasters, these climate effects are here and will last. So how can we live with these effects? And that's exactly about what we talk about when we talk about adaptation and resilience. The climate effects are there to last. The temperatures are increasing, have increased. So we just need to learn how to live with this, and to basically adapt to these new climate realities. First, by making appropriate changes in policies, in practices, and in infrastructure. So changing the behavior that we have in different industries, sectors, and also adapting the infrastructures that we have to be able to live in this new environment, these new temperatures, etc. But then there's another concept that is important to have in mind, and it's actually reaching a certain level of resilience. And resilience, it's a topic that is present in the literature in different fields. We talk about resilience a lot in psychology, for example. We talk about resilience in many different fields. But when we talk about climate resilience, is basically having the ability to anticipate, to prepare for, to be able to respond, and to recover from adverse climate events, basically. So these two topics, and I will use maybe an analogy just to try to explain a bit more what it is. It's basically if when it rains, basically, the way to adapt to a rainy day is basically to wear a raincoat when we go out in the street and we walk in the street. The way to be resilient in case of rainfall is just to take with you an umbrella, basically. It would not rain now, but it might rain sometime during the day, so we carry an umbrella to be resilient in case of a rainfall. So by using this analogy, just the way that when the effects are there, we know how to adapt to those effects, and also to be prepared in case these effects come, and also when these effects are not necessarily predictable, but just prepare ourselves to be resilient in case these effects are happening. So two very important concepts, and we'll try to talk a bit more about them in this presentation. So why is climate adaptation and resilience important? Basically, we've talked about all the different disasters, but more and more communities, cities, countries are facing severe disruptions, basically floodings, for example, heat wave, etc. It's important to be able to plan in order to take actions when these disruptions are happening. First of it is climate adaptation and resilience help us to reduce the vulnerabilities when it's about climate. It's important to identify what are those vulnerabilities, and these actions compared to mitigation, basically the actions that we take in mitigation at a global scale. The actions that we are taking in the US impact effects that's happening in Indonesia, for example. But when we talk about adaptation and resilience, it's very local and it's very specific to the needs that we have in the local space. So it's very important to understand the vulnerability in a certain region, in a certain cities, that can be quite different from the vulnerabilities that we have in another region. And the second thing, it's important, once we understand what are these vulnerabilities, to start building resilience in order to prepare and be stronger faced to these vulnerabilities. It's also important because climate adaptation and resilience, they also serve to protect the different livelihoods that we have in certain regions, and be able to support the economic sustainability and stability in a certain regions. Unfortunately, we've seen that climate effects often damage people that are the least prepared to face them, that are very linked to a certain economic activity, to small holder farming, for example, or others. Thinking about climate and resilience can better prepare these communities to stabilize their livelihoods and to prepare for these hazards in order to be flexible enough to protect basically their production, for example, the biodiversity, for example, in a region, natural resources, etc. The third aspect is actually also on public health, basically. Facing these climate hazards, there are a lot of negative impact in terms of health, based on can be pollution, but also related to water, when the water is not safe to drink, etc. So a lot of externalities in terms of health that we can help to prevent. And a very important notion is that climate adaptation and resilience pushes us to be to be planning better when these events happen, to be properly prepared and have measures that we can take over time. So the planning for these kind of things is extremely important. I want just to take a few examples of climate adaptation and resilience in innovation. There are a lot of category. I talked about the diverse categories that we have in climate innovation in general. But in the case of adaptation and resilience, there are also different categories of solutions. First thing I want to talk about preparedness, basically. And one kind of solution that is extremely important is how to develop warning systems, basically. Because when we have systems that are able to predict or forecast a specific event, flooding, for example, there are places where they have developed effective ways to predict it, and also to inform the population in a very rapid way. And sometimes, unfortunately, the countries that are the most severely affected have developed very good early warning systems. For example, Bangladesh, they have severely affected by floodings for years now, but they reach a certain level where they became really good in terms of preparedness, in terms of flooding. And just in terms of comparison, there were a severe flooding a couple of months ago in Bangladesh, and there was zero casualty the authorities were able to predict it soon enough, alert the local population, and prepare evacuation ways. And in comparison, last year in Germany, there were a lot of floodings, and they didn't have enough early warning systems there, and there were 300 casualties. So just to remind you that these kind of systems that require a certain level of technology and especially planning are very important in case of this kind of disasters. Then also, there's a lot of ways that we can adapt a little bit our production or the way that we live in order to be prepared for some event. For flooding, for example, there are a lot of different innovations around how to make either the buildings or in a smaller scale, like smallholder farms, for example, that can help to be reactive in terms of flooding. So there are, I've seen in the Philippines, for example, these floating gardens that they have just in case there's a flooding, so that the production of the village doesn't get ruined during flooding. Another example is basically all the green roofs and the green walls. The first effect of this is obviously to be prepared for heat waves, because they are a great insulator for the buildings. So there's a mitigation effect directly to this, because we need to basically use less air conditioning basically during heat wave. But another effect is actually during heavy rainfalls, when you have enough green roofs and walls in the city. These can capture basically heavy rainfall and reduce the risks of flooding within a city. And that's something that we see. There's a lot of cities around the world that is just, we see a lot of concrete, big buildings, etc. And those usually are very affected when there's heavy rainfall. Basically, the streets gets flooded quite fast. Another big category is actually related to agriculture, and there's a wide world of solutions related to adaptation for the agriculture industry. First thing, just very simple, is actually to use the adequate crops depending on the environment where we are. And we see a lot of maladaptation agriculture in regions where people are severely damaged by droughts, when there's a lot of water scarcity, that sometimes they produce with crops that are not that need a lot of water, such as wheat or others. In the contrary, there's a lot of crops that can be adapted to different environments. Just as an example, quinoa, for example, can be adapted to environments where there's heat, where you don't have a lot of water. Other things, chickpeas, for example, etc. There's a lot of crops that can be drought resistant. So it's very easy to, but the most important here is that to share the knowledge to farmers, in order for them to have the right information and using the right crops depending on the environment where they are. And another one, it's widely used and more, is everything around vertical farming. Basically, just to be independent from the rainfall, the temperature, and all that. We see a lot of techniques such as hydroponics, aquaponics, etc., to produce all year long inside buildings and control the temperature and the water use. Another large area in adaptation and resilience is everything around water systems. And we've talked a lot last week about the blue economy and all that. And there's a lot of things in common here. But basically, communities or solutions around the rainwater harvesting, basically. It's when it rains, if we have the right systems to collect that rainwater and secure it for when we need it the most. There's everything also around wastewater recycling and management. And I just wanted to point out this in particular, which is the managed aquifer recharge, which are systems that are very effective, actually, that are implemented by a couple of cities in the world, where they collect the rainfall, the recycled wastewater underground, so that it's pumped and used when it is needed. And a couple of countries in the world are using this. Berlin, for example, has a very efficient system to collect the water, mainly from water waste from the industry, collected underground and reused by the city. In other regions, also in Australia, Adelaide, for example, has an efficient system around that. In India, in Gujarat, also there's a lot of systems such as this one, or in UAE, where it is coupled actually with desalination technology. Maria have talked about it last week. Basically, it's technology that converts water from the sea, salt water, and removing basically the salt to make it fresh water. So a combination of all these techniques can start building an efficient water system at a city level, at a village level, or even at a small scale level. And finally, just there's a large world of solution around what we call the nature-based solutions. And just quick examples here. The first one is everything around the mangrove forest in a lot of different regions in the world. Those that we can see are the floating trees somehow. That unfortunately a lot of them have been deforested, mainly to be used for cooking, for example, in many regions, or to produce heat, etc. But the restoration of these mangroves have a lot of positive externalities. First, they are natural barriers for coastal erosions, floodings, and also they can absorb the energy from potential tsunamis. But they can also they clean the water that is around them, and they are also a natural habitat for a whole ecosystem of fishes. So a lot of positive externalities that we can have by replanting, regenerating mangrove forest. The second thing is agroforestry, and it's a very important technique that is spreading more and more to change the way we look at agriculture. For a long time, and I talked about the industrial revolutions, we've seen agriculture as a monoculture, very intensive agriculture. And the problem of that is, like, over time, we start to destroy the soils, and the soils are getting less and less productive over time. Agroforestry basically combines trees, plantations, and sometimes animals as well, to recreate a fertile environment and to regenerate over time the soils. Basically, the trees are there to provide shade for some productions. The leaves in the trees, they fall down, and they restart building a fertile soil over time. And sometimes even the animals, goats, sheep, or something that are walking around also help to regenerate the soil for them to be more and more fertile. And just the last example, it's the use of oysters. We're quite familiar with corals and their effect, but oyster beds as well are enabling to clean the water in those in areas, to provide also a fertile life ecosystem around them of various fish and biodiversity. But they can also reduce the effect of waves, storm surges, basically in a couple of areas. So I've introduced a couple of different innovations around the adaptation and the resilience. But now, what entrepreneurs can do actually in this space? A lot of these innovations require a certain level of infrastructure, certain level of investments that have to be done at a country level, at a city level, at a region level. However, there's a whole world of solutions that can be developed by entrepreneurs. Basically, for me, the main definition of an entrepreneur is that it's a problem solver. Basically, starts with understanding a problem, start developing solutions, and providing them to the market. And that can be a technology, a product, a service, or any other kind. So we are looking for entrepreneurs to try to come up with the right solutions, technologies, or product, being always in touch with people that are suffering from these climate effects, in order to understand what are their needs, understand how they are affected by the climate, and to test and improve the solutions that they are developing over time. So we're looking for adaptation startups exactly for that, to be able to build an environment for the users of their product or service to build adaptation, be able to be resilient, flexible to different effects of the climate. And there are just different types of adaptation and resilience solutions that we see from entrepreneurs. First of all, they are that help to build economic development in the communities where they are acting. Basically, all the solutions, for example, that are providing and helping smallholder farmers, for example, to generate more and more different economic activities, to support, for example, farmers to have an easier access to the market, an easier access to funding, so that they can develop their production facility over time, that provide a certain well-being of those population and communities. The second thing is solutions that provide more general resilience and provide something for upcoming hazards that we are not clearly identifying. Then solutions that are targeting a certain climate hazard, solutions that are tackling directly floods, for example, heat waves, etc. Solutions that are reactive to the adaptation. And here just want to remind that adaptation is an ongoing process, right? When we identify the vulnerabilities in terms of climate, the vulnerabilities of today may not be the vulnerabilities in 2 years' time, for example. In 2 years, maybe the droughts will have an effect on the soil, and maybe in 2 years, the main hazard is on the soil that has been deteriorated or something. So it's something that it's an ongoing process to keep analyzing what are the vulnerabilities and keep improving and adapting the solutions to those vulnerabilities. So that's why the reactive adaptation is important, just to be able to be flexible with the solutions that we have. And finally, it's the anticipatory adaptation for hazards that are not necessarily identified today, but that may occur sometimes in the future. So when we talk about entrepreneurs and how they can build their solution in the adaptation and the resilience space, basically for me, it always starts, like any kind of entrepreneurs, by identifying the problem, basically. And that's what most of the entrepreneurs see throughout the ClimateLaunchpad, is trying to really understand the problems that the users, that the communities that they want to serve, understand what are the causes of that problem, but also what are the effects of that problem. Based on that, the entrepreneurs basically need to engage with the different stakeholders that they have. The stakeholders can be their direct customers, they can be the direct consumers that will use that product or thing, but they can be also stakeholders outside, which are the communities that are around the production facility, for example, or others. They can be the local authorities and all that. So when thinking about developing a climate adaptation solutions, very important to engage as early as possible with the stakeholders, just to make sure that the process is following the right path. Then we have to basically develop different analysis to understand the different scenarios of the climate hazard that we're trying to talk, and then really thinking about what are the solutions. I'm mentioning this just to introduce what we call the climate causality framework, which is basically a framework that we usually use when we think about climate adaptation and resilience solutions. We start with identifying the climate hazard that we are trying to tackle and solve. We analyze what are the impacts of that hazard, what are the different effects. And through this analysis, we start identifying what are the solutions that we can bring to tackle this impact. And there are a couple of examples here in the slides. We can start, for example, with the droughts, floods. Thinking about the direct impacts of those is the reduced water availability, destructions of the different production that we can have, different crops that we can have. The yields start getting reduced, basically in a small farm. The livestock might be dying over time, etc. So once we try to identify clearly what are the different effects, we can start thinking of ways and different technologies or various innovations, basically, that can help to solve these kind of problems. Now, I will give a few examples just after that, but wanted to introduce also the concept of maladaptation. It's important to be able to design and develop solutions for adaptation and resilience. But we see a lot of startups that are trying to work and develop solutions around climate innovation in general, but sometimes they tend to have a negative effect on the other side, and that's what we call the maladaptations. The maladaptations can be around policies that are developed by countries, cities, etc., different strategies to tackle climate, different technologies that might have a negative consequence on another aspect of climate change impacts. A few examples of this, basically, one that is quite famous is when we are building a water dam to store fresh water, to produce hydro energy, basically from the water that we store. Very often, actually, it has a negative consequence, basically, on the lands that used to be irrigated from that water flow, being a river or something. A lot of communities were used to use that water to irrigate their lands. The water gets stored in a dam, and a lot of people before that were reliant on that water source doesn't have water anymore. So that's one of the examples. I talked about water-intensive agriculture in arid regions. In arid regions, for example, where we produce avocado or things like that. It's a common example of maladaptation. And finally, just when we produce biofuel from food crops, it can have a very good effect, basically, on reducing the oil use for transportation by using the biofuel. But on the other side, there's massive deforestations that can be caused by that, and also it can make the food production lower because that land is used for producing palm trees, for example, or other type of biofuel. So that's why it's a concept that is very important to understand from entrepreneurs that are in the climate space or others, because it's very important for them, in order to avoid the maladaptation, to first conduct an assessment to understand the potential risks that the technology, their solution, is bringing to the market, and understand the possible negative consequences, and try to have a holistic approach when they develop their solutions, to not only see the direct impact of their solutions, but try to understand the different environment. And when talking about the environment, again, very important to be engaged with the different stakeholders, communities, policymakers, experts, etc. And obviously foster collaboration to gather the insights, the knowledge, use that when launching a different business. I'm just looking at the time, but time is passing. So I will just briefly introduce a few examples of startups on climate adaptation and resilience that went through the Climate Launchpad, and that we have been very, very proud to support. A startup, for example, coming from Mauritius, Neos Core, that basically develop different tools to gather intelligence and being basically a decision support tool for farmers, where they get real-time data on different agricultural parameters, the water that is needed, the heat, etc. Because the access for information for farmers actually helps them to make better decisions related to their farm. So we see a lot of startups that are providing these kind of tools to support farmers to make better decisions in terms of water use, the crops that they need to use, etc. That enables them to have a higher yield and also potentially to optimize the resources that they use. Another successful startups that we've supported last year from Morocco, which is called Sand to Green, which is a startup that basically plans to regreen the deserts. Basically, an ambitious target, but basically through different technologies that they use, desalination, the various crops, agroforestry. They go in areas where the soil have been deteriorated, has been touched by desertification, etc. With a set of tools and products that they have, they can develop solutions to replant those areas and provide better soil conditions, better resources, so that to bring more life in the desert again. Another startup that we supported, Sabon Sake from Ghana, that provides different products again for a better soil management. So different products to regenerate soils that have been deteriorated, but also an integrated management tool that helps the farmers also to better regenerate and create resilience in their farms. And lastly, just last example of a startup from Pakistan that enables households to optimize the use of water within their houses. So I will end here. Just
great. So I would like to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Ayub, for sharing your knowledge, and thank you for our sponsors, Irish Aid and Climate-KIC as well, guys. Thank you so much.